Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. For the past few years, host Jorden Guth has been learning about the who, the what, and the when of hi-fi from the pioneers who made our hobby what it is today, as well as the modern innovators who are constantly striving to push performance to new levels. That's not going to change, but this year he'll also be learning about the other two W's, where your favorite gear is made these days, and why. So with that out of the way, let's see who Jorden is chatting with this time around.
Hello and welcome to the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. Today we're in Worcester, Massachusetts at Vinnie Rossi with its founder and chief engineer, Vinnie Rossi. Welcome, Vinnie.
Hi, Jorden.
Thanks for inviting us down to Worcester. Am I saying it right?
You're the way you're saying it is correct. The way it's spelled is different, but everybody, it looks like Worcester, but it's Worcester.
Worcester.
Yeah.
Worcester. Really cool town. And there's a lot of little things that we can talk about, including the smiley face that everyone probably knows, but I'm guessing not too many people know that it's actually from this town. Really cool stuff. So anyways, getting into the hi-fi, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into hi-fi originally. Where did this passion come from that has led you to creating a company that's been around for 20 something years?
Yeah. As far back as I could remember, I think I was about 4 years old, and I was that kid crawling around, and my parents had I wasn't crawling at 4, but my parents had, a stereo system in the living room, and I wouldn't say they were considered audiophiles, but they had separate components. So we had a turntable, they had cassette deck, amplifier, and the whole thing. And I was always just drawn to this and going up to it, interacting with it, and just hearing music being played and having the sense of wonder, like how that's all happening. So it wasn't just, I loved music at a young age, but it was just understanding, like that engineer side of me was just wanted to piece it together. And then, I think as early as 4, I had a cassette recorder, and just always in wonder how, when I could just record my voice and play back cassettes, how this cassette with this magnetic tape that's just going around, sometimes it would get, all chewed up and get stuck, but it was just like, how does that get onto the tape and get off the tape? And I was just always fascinated by it. And years have gone by, and then my father had one of the earlier CD players, and I remember him bringing in the CD player home and showing me a compact disc, and I picked it up and I looked underneath it, and it was just like this shiny disc that looked like a prism, a rainbow effect, and I'm like, the music is on that, and it was like this sense of mystique that it could just magically hop to different songs, and you could tell it where it goes, and it's like, I was just baffled by it and was amazed. And that all just really cultivated an interest in electronics, audio specifically, as a hobbyist, at a young age. And then I started out with much more modest systems and boom boxes, and then going up into smaller components and things, and tinkering. That was another key theme, was me always wanting to get inside these products and try to understand what was going on, and then find out what makes what part inside had an effect on what I was hearing, and that's really started my interest in electronics. And from there, I went on to study electrical engineering.
Now, so you were studying electrical engineering. Was it because of audio specifically, or is that kind of a side hobby that happened to converge into what you ended up doing?
It was a side, so the audio was a hobby, and that wasn't why exactly I was studying electrical engineering, but it definitely pushed me in that direction because I knew I wanted to have a better understanding of audio components. So if I could open it up and understand what was happening and how does it all work. But I was also interested in other electronics as well. It wasn't just audio. So I had one of the earlier Commodore 64 computers, nice. So I was a bit of a geek with that as well. And radio-controlled cars had electronics in them, and other hobbies like that. So it wasn't just audio, but that was the one that I gravitated the most.
Awesome. And I should say, this is all happening in New York, like New York, or close to.
Yeah, north of New York City. I grew up about an hour or so north of New York City. So I wasn't in the city, yeah.
And then for college or university, you went through electrical engineering.
That's right.
Awesome. And coming out of college and university, how did this all kind of come back together?
Okay, so out of college, my first job was not in audio. It was with a company called Lucent Technologies, and they were tied into a building with Bell Labs. And I was working as a test engineer for high-speed fiber optic transmitter and receivers. So basically developing test sets to test telecom equipment that transmitted large amounts of data at the time through fiber optic. So it's tuning the lasers, eye pattern, and the receiver, and testing for the most performance they could achieve at the time going through a fiber optic cable that was the diameter of a human hair or less.
That's wild.
Yeah, so it was a lot of interaction with test equipment and writing scripts to do automated testing. But what was happening was on the side, meaning after work, I was listening to music and still tinkering. And then because I had a salary, I was able to afford different types of audio gear that I couldn't in the past. And I was just still that person who would get something in and want to, like if it was something that was more of a mass-produced product like a Sony CD player, for instance, they usually offered a service manual where you could see the schematic diagrams and really understand how it all comes together. And that's what really got me into modifying the gear and changing out the circuits, changing out the clocks, the output stage, adding in a tube. I started building, kits from teenage years on, but it was just more and more of that. And at the time also, there were quite a few audio online forums that were, this is all before, YouTube and really social media, but it was online forums and posting about projects that I was working on and showing this is what I'm doing to this product and this is all the changes that were made. And I would get messages from people saying, hey, would you mind doing that for me? And what would you charge for that? And I just never was thinking in terms of a business. And then I was also tinkering with smaller low power amps, converting them to battery power. And again, I was getting the messages saying, what would that cost if I were to buy one of those? And I didn't have a business background, but I knew that communication was number one with whoever you're working with, that if you could explain what you're offering, what's unique about it, and give them the level of service that maybe there was something there that I could start with. But I also knew there was no way I was going to be able to start this on the side. Like either I'm going to devote full time to it or I'm not going to do it as a business. Yeah. So after working for the company that I was with for, I'd say 4 years or so, I just decided, you know what, I'm ready to do this. It was at the end of 2004, and I gave my notice. It wasn't, it was just time for me to go. And they just didn't understand it. And then, they were asking, well, is it about pay? We could we could help you there. And it's like, it's not about money. It's just, this is what I want to do. And I'm young and this is my chance. And then, I had some money saved aside, not a whole lot, but I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I need to be thrown into it. Just like, kind of like how I learned to swim, I didn't have those lessons. I just had to struggle and figure it out. And that's what happened.
Throw right into the deep end.
Yeah.
And that was the birth of Red Wine Audio.
Yeah. So the play on words was, if it's Vinnie Rossi, if you spell it VINI and then Rossi, ROSSI, that means red wines in Italian. I'm Italian American, second generation. So, but I thought that would be a cool name that kind of hid my name, at least without making it about me. Later on, that was changed in 2015 to Vinnie Rossi, but we could go into that in a bit. And the early products, besides a few modifications, it was battery-powered components, preamplifiers, power amps, DACs, phono stages, and integrateds. Oh, I'm sorry, and headphone amplifiers.
Headphone amplifiers. I didn't know that you did those as well.
Yeah. This is all under the Red Wine brand, and that went on for about 10 years. all it's factory direct. So I was selling direct from my user form online.
I was going to ask, did you have a website set up at this point, or was this like...
I had a basic website. There was a way to purchase through the website, but all the interaction with the customers was going on via the user form, and people watching the form. It was on a site called audiocircle.com.
Okay.
And what you would pay to have like a little section of that form where it was your own manufacturer section that you could post about your products and interact with people who are interested. And I was doing this not just in the US, but globally, but far more was in North America.
Okay. So I didn't even actually know a site like that existed. Like I'm part of all kinds of user forums, but I've never seen like a manufacturer side. It's almost like a, what would you even call that? Like, was there a bunch of other manufacturers that were doing this?
There were a handful of other manufacturers. Some still are there. And then I've noticed over the years, other sites were doing a similar thing. There are a handful of them, like What's Best Audio Forum. There's Audiophile Style and quite a few others where there is a section where a manufacturer could be a sponsor for the site, not from the main discussion, but off to the side, it was their own section where they could interact with customers and show new products, entertain new ideas, and get feedback. And that's how it all was happening. And when back then, when I was factory direct, that was the most useful thing to have, because you're on your own. I mean, you don't have a network of dealers and distributors, so you really have to. It's more grassroots.
So were these original products ones that effectively the user base that you were interacting with said, I want a headphone amplifier, for instance.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I can make a headphone amplifier.
And wouldn't it be cool if that integrated you made, if you put that headphone output stage into that, and, how about option for a DAC? And it doesn't mean you can't always entertain every idea, but at the time I was doing a lot of customization. So our first integrated amp, I mean, you could buy that and we could add it, make it a 1 input, 2, 3, input select if you wanted, and different other features such as right down to the speaker posts and the volume attenuator if you wanted a potentiometer or a step attenuator.
Yeah.
So like there was some level of customization that we were doing, and also a bigger enclosure with a larger battery for longer runtime, for instance.
And all of this, like right off the bat, were you able to make a living? Like, were you able to kind of get your legs just up and running, or was there like a period of time that it took to kind of ease into this to actually make it sustainable?
Thankfully, starting at the first year, 2005, it was enough to live off of. I had enough things going on that I was able to pay the bills. I mean, I'm not saying we were thriving, but we were doing okay.
You weren't asking for your job back?
No, and I never looked back. I just was always so busy, and if I wasn't building, I was working on other projects, and I just felt like when I started my own business, my days, they really went by quickly. Like I felt like I would start the day, and before I knew it, it was getting late, like time to be home. Like it's just the hours flew by, and it's been like that ever since.
Oh, that's wild. So, okay, that was 2005. You started making the red wine products. There seems to be quite a lot of red wine products, and like we were able to see yesterday in your shop, you had one of the older devices still there. I guess that was a test device, so it wasn't necessarily the finished product. But when you're looking at the red wine products in retrospect, was there like a design language? Was there something consistent across all of those products, or because of their customization, was it very much like kind of build to suit using different chassis and different stuff?
Yeah, the earlier days were more built to suit, and then we started doing a product line that, these are very simple chassis. And the common theme with just about everything with red wine was the battery power solution. And then we started using tube input stages. There were 2 buffers on the input and solid state on the output stage for the amplifiers. So that carried over. We did have a few different DAC models and phono stages.
And why battery powered? Like why was that a thing?
I started out and it was mainly, I was into lower power amplifiers. So I'm not looking to make monster amps, but I found that at the price point that we were at back then, which was much lower, battery offered a significant advantage to get a quiet power supply that offered high current. But it was optimal for up to a certain power point, and then it's like you would need more batteries to step up your voltage level if you wanted to make something more than our first amp was 6 watts per channel. Then we had a 15 and a 30 watt. Eventually, we got up to about 100 watts, but it's like the batteries became very unwieldy, and you need more battery cells to make the voltage higher, and then you need to balance them all and keep them in good condition. And that was the other trick with batteries, the charging and making sure that if there were people who forgot to turn it off, would it kill the battery, things like that. We had to service the batteries as well.
And yeah, just based on the time, and we were joking about different battery technology yesterday. Were these nickel cadmium batteries? Were these?
No, we started out with the lead acid.
Okay.
And then that was for the first, I'd say 5-6 years. And then we switched over to lithium iron phosphate packs.
Oh, there you go. The OG lithium stuff.
Yeah, but these were great because they had a circuit board built into the pack that balanced each cell in the battery pack.
Okay. All right. So now we're getting kind of mid into the teens of the 2000s. So probably around 2015 or so.
Yeah, we came out with a whole new platform and we changed the name to Vinnie Rossi. This was something that was being suggested by people for a while, and everybody was dealing, again, directly with me. And it made sense to change the name because we were no longer doing battery power. We started working with a company called Bellison who made super regulators that we used for a power supply that we put to the test, compared, and said, yeah, we can achieve much higher performance than battery. Yes, these are more expensive products. They push the performance higher. We could get the higher voltage rails needed to achieve higher power amplifiers. And we started out with the Leo, which was a modular platform.
That's the one that we saw yesterday, I believe. Yeah.
So it used ultra capacitors instead of batteries, which are very similar to batteries that they store, charge, and run off the capacitor. But the other the half the product was the power supply. The other half was let's just call it like a motherboard where you could put in modules. So a phono stage could go here, a DAC could go here. A headphone amp could go here, a tube input stage. So you could configure it the way you wanted.
So essentially you went from these bespoke kind of boxes built to suit to a little bit more of a modular system that allowed you to streamline what you were actually manufacturing.
Exactly. So if someone came in just looking for a preamp, they could configure it as one. If they want a preamp with DAC but no phono, they could. And then you could add a phono. I mean, you could really go all out and make it. At the time, I think John Darko coined the term super integrated. It was either that or it was Sir John from Six Spoons. But the idea was an integrated amp that had all the inputs, the DAC, the phono, the headphone. This is before streaming really took off, but you could achieve that as well.
That's super cool. All right. So we now have switched over to Vinnie Rossi, and you've started to streamline the products that we just saw. And I know they've been in development for quite some time, and we kind of talked a little bit about that. The product range that we just saw was the Brama.
That's correct.
So where did the idea for Brama start? And how did, this wasn't like a one day, this is what we're going to do. This was a long process. So did the idea of the kind of even more simplified range come about, or how did that conversation start? Okay.
So first, let me mention a product that followed the Leo. The Vinnie Rossi was the L2. It was an integrated, not quite as modular as Leo, but there was some modularity for the phono and DAC. But what made it also different than Leo was it was a more powerful integrated. achieving over 100 watts per channel. But around 2019, that's when we decided that because of where we were and where we saw where we wanted to go, it was best suited for dealers and distributors. So no more factory direct.
Okay.
And we actually transitioned L2 into a dealer distributor network, but it really wasn't, that wasn't initially what the plan was. And I knew that wasn't the ultimate product for that kind of market and model. And what we learned from Leo and L2, especially working with like directly heated triodes in the line stage, we wanted to really optimize that and scale up because we saw a void in the market, not so much at the price point of L2, but higher. When you got up in price point, we thought we could do things in a better way, not just in terms of sound quality, but also build quality, design aesthetics. Like I had a vision for this, but I needed help sussing it out. And so when we started planning for the next product, before we even had the name for it, I did hire an industrial designer.
And I love this story. So how did this industrial designer get spotted by you?
Yeah, so I was working with someone at the time who was managing my sales network. And he spotted, his son was playing Nintendo Switch, and he spotted in one of those magazines, there was something about a Nintendo Switch, like a redesigned concept. And it was by this industrial designer in Montreal named Olivier Raymond. And it kind of, I don't know how viral it went, but it was out there. Like people were taking notice of this because it was like people were on those type of platforms saying, I wish Nintendo would do this and make a Switch like this. So like I checked out his website and I noticed that he understood product design and he had a very clean design aesthetic and sense. But what really caught my eye was the fact that he worked for Porsche Design, Mercedes. He worked with the interior of automobiles, user interfaces, analog gauges, like that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that's where I was hoping to go with our new product line, Brama. And we started having conversations and honing in on what does Vinnie Rossi want its look and feel to be going forward. Like all this time, I'm kind of changing things around, and the design of older designs to the new were looking quite different. So it was trying to really figure out how do we want to move forward and come up with a unique identity in terms of design. And based on conversations, we decided what we really we were looking for was a timelessness, a sense of a design aesthetic that wasn't retro, wasn't futuristic, was sort of minimal, not trying to have so much visual noise on the front panel and in the user interface, and something that just felt exquisite, that looked beautiful, that didn't have to shout to get attention. It just commanded it naturally, just from all its justified proportions. I mean, Olivier was fantastic and really understood what I was looking for. And some of his favorite designers like Dieter Rams and Johnny Ives, for instance. I mean, he really studied this. Yeah. And once I explained what I was looking for, we would toss designs back and forth. He'd show me sketches and then mock-ups, and we honed in on what became named Brama. And that was Olivier's name that he picked, and I'm like, I like it. And in Italian, it translates to like a longing or a strong desire or craving. And that's really what this was all about, a strong desire to create something that was unique and just significant in its own right.
I don't know that anyone listening, if you haven't seen this, and the pictures they do it some justice, but when you see it in person, these chassis are a solid block of aluminum. The heat sinks are this like super cool extruded section on the side.
Not extruded, it's milled out.
Oh, milled out, sorry. There you go, milled out. It is gorgeous. And not only is it gorgeous on the outside, like very, very simple analog dial on the front face. And the analog dial actually serves multiple purposes. And we could talk about that because I think that's super cool. But not only all that, when I think of tubes, the first thing that I think of is tubes are one of those products or one of those things that in a product, everyone wants to highlight them. So everyone puts tubes out in front and all of this and all that. Yeah. And they make it very like visually striking. And the design aesthetic of this series is so cool in that the inside of this product looks just as beautiful, if not more beautiful than the outside.
Thank you. And
the tubes are actually tucked away on the inside. Yeah. Super easy to kind of switch them out if needed and all of that. But the kind of design aesthetic doesn't scream. It's not something that you're like, you walk into a room and you say, oh, wow. But it kind of has that presence of like, oh, this is like very thoughtful. And when we started talking about the inside of it, and I'm kind of a computer nerd and all this, like this looks like a piece of art from the inside out. And you were telling me a little bit about kind of the cable paths and the routing and all that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. So number one, from the outside, this looks like a solid chunk of aluminum. In order to actually assemble this has to be assembled on its top, so upside down.
Correct.
To get access to everything.
Because we didn't want to have a top panel that was separate, screwed in. So we wanted it to not, from the exterior, we didn't want to have bolts and screws. So visual. So the only place you could put them is on the bottom, where that's how you hide them. So what we did was we designed the body to be a solid block, like you say, where it's machined from one block of aluminum. And they flip it upside down when they machine it and mill it out from the inside and create the cavities within that fit things like the power supply and the amplifier boards. But exactly like you say, it's all assembled upside down, and all the components that produce the heat, mainly the power amplification, but also in the power supply, mount to the very top on the inside, if that makes sense. So all the heat is up at the top on the big wide surface at the top of the product. And that's where you want the heat to really start and end, at the top, because that's where it wants to go. So that's exactly what happens. So we builded them upside down. And then the final step after testing is installing the base, which when you're building it feels like, okay, you're closing the top, but of course that's the bottom. Yeah. It's fine. And then you flip it over and it's like, it's done. So it's really, this way it's seamless, literally, like you don't have seams. The only seam is really the separator where the base meets the body, but the main body and all around the sides and the top, there are 0 seams, there are 0 screws.
And you were explaining that this actually also has a benefit in terms of heat dissipation, because every time there's a seam, it's a place where the heat essentially doesn't or is not as efficient at dispersing itself.
Right. So previous designs, all the things we've done in the past with heat sinking would be like typically the side panel. And that's a separate panel that gets bolted onto the bottom, for instance, but all the amplifiers would be, the left and the right would be on those side panels. And all the heat would very much stay onto that side panel because, as you mentioned, when you have a disconnect, a physical disconnect where the aluminum is cut, it doesn't conduct the heat anywhere near like a solid piece would, where it travels through the metal. Now there's a divide. So yeah, all the heat would be contained to the sides, but we felt that if we tried the solid body approach, that we could get better thermal performance because it wraps around and on the top and the sides uniformly over time. So it acts like a much larger heatsink, and that's what we wanted because we didn't want a much larger product.
Gotcha.
So you have to figure out how to work with the physics. You can't violate it, but there's so much heat that has to be dissipated, and you have so much material, and you want to get that surface area. And if the heat could wrap around to all the surfaces more easily, then you will get a beneficial body, a product to dissipate it.
So aside from the heat and the kind of that unibody design for that aspect, there's also the shielding benefits that come into play with your design.
Yeah, number 2 benefit would be the shielding, in that there's no opening. So all the digital bath that we're swimming in all day, like from everything that's out there, your fluorescent lights, your phones, I mean, everything, it can't get through because it's a fully grounded chassis. And especially for the tubes that you mentioned earlier, they're tucked inside on their side, mounted to the rear panel. So they're positioned horizontally. because they're fully encased in this aluminum body that's sealed. So there's no way to pick up external noise. And that's gave us a tremendous benefit in lowering our noise floor.
And then the other thing that I absolutely love, and I think it was like visually it's striking, but there's a design reason for it, and it's the cable management inside the chassis. So not only kind of how it's kind of positioned and all that, but also the lengths of the cables.
Yeah. So like for instance, the whole line stage, the preamp stage is all, it's a dual mono design mounted completely on the rear of the unit, the rear panel. So the input and output jacks directly connect to a 6-layer circuit board. And on the other side of the board is the tube socket. So if you were to look at the Brama preamplifier, for instance, and trace out the path from the input, the balanced input jacks through the tube stage, through the volume control, and back to the output jacks, the balanced output stage, you're looking at just a few centimeters. I mean, it's minimal. So you're not going through cables coming off the jacks onto some other board that's located elsewhere. The front panel rotary encoder for the volume control doesn't actually process the volume signal. We don't send the analog signal to that front. It's all maintained and controlled on the rear panel. That front panel knob sends a signal to change the relay settings, which switch resistors that set the attenuation on the rear panel. So by sandwiching all the audio paths in ground planes of the circuit board and keeping the trace lengths to a few centimeters, we realize substantial benefits in noise floor, but also just in the way we would get a higher resolution sound, because you're not going through all these other connectors and cables that, I mean, as everybody will say, no cable or no connector is the best.
Yeah.
So we want to minimize that, and we want to keep it dual mono on the rear panel. And then for the case of the integrated, we do the same, but we then bring the preamp output signal through from the preamp board to the power amp boards that are inside the unit. And it's not just the signal paths lengths that matter; it's the power paths. So a big amount of size taken up by our products in the Brama range is the power supply. And we centrally locate that power supply from within inside its own chamber that's milled into that aluminum block. So it has its own thick wall surrounding it everywhere so that, no noise can radiate out, interfere with the audio. But the DC output rails that come off the power supply that feed the amplification, they're also just a few centimeters. There's substantial benefits to lowering the power path lengths as well as the signal path lengths, and that's what we achieved with Brama.
I've already kind of made this suggestion, and I think it would be so cool. If anyone sees these at a show, hopefully there's going to be one that's opened up so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Because pictures, I mean, pictures look beautiful, but you have to see this in person to kind of do it justice.
You see way more detail, and you see that even within this cavity that's machined out, there's different heights of aluminum that are machined because there's different areas where we want to pull more heat from. So there's so much machining going on inside, and you can see how a beautiful 5-axis CNC machine could mill out a piece of aluminum in such a way that it optimizes your layout and placement. So by going smaller and having it contained into a smaller enclosure, we could really optimize those path lengths and improve performance.
I love it. Now, when it comes to where these products are made and where they're assembled, we're obviously in Worcester, Massachusetts. So we know that all the assembly gets done here. We talked a little bit yesterday about this idea of where the actual components get made, and why they get made in different places, and kind of the pros and cons from your side of things. So when you were setting out to kind of launch this Brama series, there is an entire podcast episode that we could do all about just kind of the design process and how this came about during COVID and all this and the reworks and chips and all that. So we're going to just kind of gloss over that for right now. Maybe we'll jump into that later because I think that's fascinating. But when it comes to what you've landed on for the chassis and the other components, walk me through a little bit about that. So the actual enclosure itself, that aluminum unibody that we're talking about, how you had that design.
Yeah.
How did you get it made?
We ended up going with a company in the UK. And the reason was we were looking for such a beautifully crafted enclosure, and it's not just the CNC work that counts. I mean, there are a lot of companies, even in the United States, that could do the machining of the metal, but the next step is the metal finishing. That is what really separates the wheat from the chaff. I mean, that's an art in itself. And when I say metal finishing, I'm talking about the fine glass bead blasting to get the beautiful texture that you feel. It's very fine and uniform, and the way in which the light hits it and bounces off of it, it just has a beautiful shimmer to it without being too reflective. It's just getting this texture, which is very fine, but then also you have to anodize the metal. You can't leave it raw because it'll oxidize and start to, kind of tarnish is maybe not the right word, but it's like that. So it needs to be anodized, and in doing that, you're putting it into a chemical bath that, for lack of better words, I'd say it's like a sealant that coats it. It's done electrically, so they have to connect it to a voltage source, and then the chemical bonds into the metal and creates this anodization process, which is a very thin coating that's uniform. But it's challenging to get, after anodizing, it's challenging to make sure that the finish remains what you want. And the way in which, if you look at it from different angles, not having any discoloration effects, it's really hard work, especially when you're dealing with something of such thick metal, because these are also being submerged in chemical at a certain temperature. So you have to control temperature, you have to control voltage, you have to control what they call dwell time, which is how long does it submerge in for. There's so many factors that go into metal finishing. It's quite unbelievable. And then making sure that a company could produce repeatability and consistency piece after piece, because at this price point and this quality level, the expectations are very high. Like, it really needs to feel and look premium.
Well, and you gave the example, and I never really thought about this. If somebody buys, let's say, the integrated amp one year, and they say, I love this so much, the aesthetic's perfect, it sounds awesome, and they want to come back and buy like the next year. Yeah. The finishing has to look the same, or people are going to be like, what's going on? Yeah.
I mean, if you have from batch to batch, if the quality looks good, it's smooth, but the coloration is different, I mean, it won't match. Yeah. So it's really getting batch to batch consistency, which is also difficult. So we ended up going with a company in the UK because they had experience in high-end audio metal finishing. So they were doing this for a few other very high-end companies, and they knew the expectations.
And you kind of mentioned this already, but you were looking at where else could do this, and there wasn't anyone that kind of checked all of those boxes within the United States or North America or anywhere for that matter. And when it came to China, the potential to have the quality may have been there, but it was just at a level that it was unreasonable in terms of quantity required to make that happen.
There are places in Asia where they don't necessarily need high quantity, but unless if it's a small company like going in and trying to get parts made, you really need the quality management to be in place. Like, all right, we all know Apple, and we know the level of their metal finishing is remarkable. Yep. But they really set up their own company there, where they have their own management team. Like, it's Apple from California, but setting up shop in Asia and having their products made to their specifications. And they spent a fortune in creating those processes, the automation. It's not something that could be easily done when you're dealing with, several hundred units versus something like Apple makes, which is, millions. Yeah. It's like the investment is it's not that any particular country can't do it. It's just the cost is to set up and to educate and train. Anybody could do it if they have the tools and the means to do it. But for a small company like Vinnie Rossi making enclosures at these lower volumes, you really need to align with someone who, a company that could do that and offer that for you, and really look after the quality and really not ship something that has any problems, instead of just shipping it the way it is. Like, they really need to reprocess it and make sure, like, they know the expectations. We get each other, and they know what would work or what wouldn't.
Awesome. And when we're talking about some of the other components, the other one that kind of struck me was, when I think of tubes, I immediately think of Russia for making tubes.
Yeah.
And then I think of China. And the tubes that you're using are Western Electric, so made right here in the United States. And I think the interesting thing for me, I kind of asked you, I'm like, was this always the case? Did you always use these, or was this because of kind of new restrictions? And you said, no, you use these tubes because...
Yeah. Well, first, we didn't always use Western Electrics and other products. I used Electro-Harmonics, which were made in Russia. We switched to the Western Electrics for the Brama because one thing that we were doing with our previous products, we're changing out tubes, what they call tube rolling, and determining, for a higher cost, higher performing tube, the sonic improvements were there and very valid. So we knew we could get better. It turns out that Western Electric, when they brought back the WE300B, we found that was our favorite sounding tube overall in this design topology. And the fact that they also make it in USA is convenient. But if they were made elsewhere, we'd still use it because it sounds the way we want, and the quality is there. They send out a test card. You probably saw that in the box, where each tube goes through its own computer testing, and all the parameters are examined, and we specify what we're looking for in those tubes so they could handpick matched pairs that work best for our design, and they're willing to do that. And we just like aligning with a company that goes the extra mile in that regard, and they warranty their tubes for 5 years. We warranty Brama, though, for 10 years, including the tubes that come with it. Like, we warranty the whole thing, parts, labor, tubes. Because,
everything.
Yeah, we know that those tubes will last a very long time in that design, because they're used for power amplifiers, where they're ran at much higher voltages, much higher current, so they get way hotter, and they're driving a difficult load of an output transformer into a loudspeaker. Well, we're not doing that. When we're driving the input stage of a power amplifier, which is much less current, they get way less hot. We even have a soft start when it turns on that's gradually ramps up the cathode voltage. So, like, they're really being babied in there so nicely that they're not subjected to all the stress that they would in a power amp. So we know they're going to last a very long time. So it's worth putting in the best sounding tube in a product of this level to get the highest performance. And so the customer doesn't have to think, well, maybe I should try this one because maybe I'll get even better results. It's like they could rest assured that, we picked the one that we optimized for our circuit. Like, we designed it around that tube.
I love it. And when we're talking about the 10-year warranty, this is another big thing, because there are products out there that are quite expensive, and they may have warranty claims and all this stuff, but you guys are backing up with 10 years, which is quite substantial.
We've always done 10 years with our products. And even if it's a unit that's out of warranty, we still service. Once in a while, I still see customers who have the old red wine, the earlier models that we make, they reach out because they love it and they want to keep it going, and they need a new battery, or they want to convert it to a power supply, and we still do it even if it's out of warranty. But yeah, the 10-year warranty at this price point, I think should be an expectation of the customer. Like, this is not an inexpensive product, and if you stand behind your build and all your measures you put in to protect it against over voltage, over current, over temp. It should all be built in so that it's going to last, and someone who buys it feels confident they're getting something built with so much care and intention. There's no reason why you can't deliver a warranty and make it work out for everybody that way.
Yeah. And I mean, when you see these products in person, and again, I encourage you, if you're ever at a show, to go check out Vinnie Rossi, because when you look at these in person, you can see the care and attention to detail. And I'm going to say it again, you guys need to open one of these up and just have it on display at a show so people can look inside and kind of see how that's all put together, because it is quite impressive. There's one last question, and we're already kind of over time, and I appreciate you taking all this time. When somebody comes on the show, I gotta ask, if there was like an album or a soundtrack to your life or a song that you could put on nonstop, or a song right now that you're hooked on that you could share, what would that song or soundtrack or album be?
That's good on the spot. Like last night, I needed to relax after we had a busy day, and I put on the soundtrack to the movie Amelie.
Okay.
And it's by the composer Jan Tiersen, and I'm trying to remember the exact name of the piece, but it's a piano solo that's just beautiful, and it just has like a dreamy quality that just, I don't know, it gets my mind also thinking at the same time. It relaxes but also inspires. So that's what I was just listening to, just at the top of my thought right now. Definitely check that one out if you haven't, or even see the movie. I thought it came out in the early 2000s, but it was...
I'll throw it on my Spotify playlist, and that'll be what I listen to on the flight home.
Okay. Sounds good, Jordan.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having us. And for those listening that also like the video content that we produce, we should have a couple of videos coming out in the next little bit.
Thanks again for the opportunity, Jordan.
Thank you. All the best.